Dear friends, colleagues, and supporters of the Center for Urban Education, thank you so much for joining me and Sean, as well as our very special and illustrious guests, Michelle Siqueiros, the president of the Campaign for College Opportunity, Tia Mcnair, vice president at the Association for American Colleges and Universities, Max Espinosa, a program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Anna Newman, a professor at Teachers College, Columbia University. It is so gratifying to see so many of you here with us. From the many messages that I have received since Sean and I flooded social media with tweets about today's virtual event, I know that you're very curious to hear our news. And I will get to that in just a few moments. As many of you know, this year marks 20 years that the Center for Urban Education has focused on the fight for racial equity. In light of that legacy, I want to acknowledge that in our current environment, we must redouble our efforts and resources to uphold racial equity as a matter of moral urgency and civic decency. The pandemic has laid bare the ravages of racial inequity, and it is shocking to watch day after day how many more Blacks, Latinx, Native Americans, and other racially minoritized individuals are dying. The disproportionate impact of the pandemic on poor communities of color is no accident. It's no accident. It is the cumulative effect of racist practices and policies that deny communities of color basic rights and privileges. The brutal murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd are horrifying, further underscoring the disregard for Black and Brown lives. Most of us have seen the video of a police officer with his knee pressed against Mr. Floyd's neck. Much to my shock, he seems relaxed, with his hands in his pockets, looking straight ahead, coldly indifferent, as he savagely murdered Mr. Floyd. This image represents the obscenity of racism. We should not forget it. And as higher education practitioners, we have to think hard what we can do to bring a racial equity focus to the education of police officers. As I now shift to what brings us to today's virtual gala, I want to take a moment to tell you what motivated me to create a center that has been dedicated to racial equity in higher education since its beginnings. Up until 1999, I was pretty much an academic in the traditional sense, moving from assistant to full professor. And then one day, I suddenly found myself in a sort of professional and personal crisis. This crisis is what motivated me to found the Center for Urban Education, or CUBE as we call it. The reason for this crisis was that before I earned my doctorate, I had worked in New Jersey in 2 grassroots Puerto Rican community-based organizations. In these organizations, my role was to advocate for the educational rights of Puerto Ricans and other Latinx groups. After 10 years of doing this work, I went off to Teachers College in New York City to earn my doctorate in higher education. And as I sometimes put it, I was seduced by the abstractness of what I was studying. Up until 1999, 10 years after joining the professoriate and 4 years after having reached the status of full professor, I was a traditional academic doing all the right scholarly things to advance my academic career. I don't regret having done those things. In fact, having done those things probably made me a much more effective director of the Center for Urban Education. But in 1999, 2000, I began to question what my current work had to do with the advocacy work of my 20s. It was that self-questioning and doubts about the impact of my work that gave me the resolve to create CUE, with a focus on racial equity in higher education. As I saw it at the time, the diversity agenda that had been taken up by higher education in the 1980s and 1990s fell short of the aspirations that motivated the civil rights agenda. For me, the urgent issue was to address racial equity in educational outcomes as a matter of institutional accountability and responsibility. Having diversity without equity may have had symbolic benefits for universities, but it had no substantive benefits for minoritized students. What makes CUE unique is that from day one, the focus of our work is not to fix or remediate students. We resolved to focus on changing institutions by changing the practices and minds of educators and leaders. We upended the focus on the achievement gap of Blacks, Latinx, Native Americans, and marginalized Asian American groups to focus instead on the failing performance of higher education for these populations. We pioneer methods of critical inquiry to help higher education practitioners and leaders see that practices that they believed to be racially neutral were in fact racialized, and that they were the cause of the achievement gap that they often lamented but renounced as their responsibility. We taught practitioners and leaders to ask, why are we so much more successful with white students than we are with racially minoritized groups? Why is it that our practices fail to bring about success for these groups? What has been unique about CUE's work is that we have dedicated ourselves, sorry, my mouse is not moving here, that we have dedicated ourselves to creating the tools, the processes and practices to help practitioners become racially conscious and develop into equity-minded practitioners. Since this morning, troubled by that image of Mr. George Floyd being asphyxiated, I have been thinking about ways in which our work can address police brutality through the curriculum. Police officers earn certificates and degrees from our colleges. CUE has created a suite of tools to deconstruct syllabi and course content. We need to assess what police officers are taught and if and how they are taught to exercise policing with the same respect and care they would want themselves to be treated. CUE's footprint now is broad and deep. Over 20 years, our tools and methods have touched 678 institutions, starting with the first equity scorecard cohort in California that included Occidental College, University of Laverne, Redlands, Mount St. Mary's, Loyola Marymount, Cal State Dominguez Hills, Cal State LA, Cal State Fullerton, Santa Monica Community College, Long Beach City College, Rio Honda, De Anza, and so many more. And over the years, we expanded beyond California into the University of Wisconsin system. Thank you, Vicki Washington, if you're out there in the audience, because you helped us move beyond California. The Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education also took up the equity scorecard. And Jim Moran, if you're out there in the audience, thank you. Q's tools are in institutions throughout Colorado, in community colleges in Texas, Oklahoma, Illinois, Nevada, and we're even in the Coast Guard Academy and Leiden University in the Netherlands. We also created new language and concepts. I am proud that Q came up with the term equity-minded to represent the actions, beliefs, values, and knowledge of race-conscious practitioners. The word equity-minded is now a household word used widely, although sometimes, I must admit, much to my dismay, without fidelity to its roots in critical race theory. The work of Q is documented in numerous articles in top-flight peer-reviewed journals, in magazines, including Change. And here I tell you, be on the lookout. This week, they will be releasing a new issue of Change that is co-edited by myself, Tia Mcnair, and Laurel Espinosa, and it will be the topic, very timely, on the unpaid debt of higher education. We have also published in various of the AACU publications, in books, and we have at least 20 dissertations, PhD dissertations and EDD dissertations, including several that have received awards from the Association for the Study of Higher Education, the National Institute for the Study of Transfer Students, and the Rossier School of Education at the University of Southern California. The anti-racist and equity-focused agenda that I set for Q 20 years ago shares the ideals and commitment that motivated my community-oriented advocacy with and on behalf of the Puerto Rican community in New Jersey many decades ago, too many. Lately, as we consider Q's 20th year history, I am often asked, what is next for Q? Some even ask, what is in store for the next 20 years of Q? And the only thought that comes to my mind is, I hope I'm still alive in 2040. So here is the answer to what is next for Q. As of July 1st of this year, it will merge with the USC Race and Equity Center, something that I have been working on for the last 4 years with Sean Harper. And I will also retire at the end of this year. 4 years ago, I was on sabbatical in my beloved Mexico City. And during my time there, I decided I would retire from USC after my 70th birthday, and that time has come. My dilemma, though, was the future of Q. Sean's decision to move from the University of Pennsylvania to USC came just at the right time, and it was clear to me that he was the natural and rightful inheritor of Q, and that I could retire at age 70. Sean and I have a shared vision about racial equity in higher education. We have not been afraid to be viewed as scholars with activist agendas, and we have a long history of collaborative work, including joint grants that we currently lead. As someone who has studied organizations and leadership, I know that mergers can be very messy, but this merger is moving along perfectly. The work of REC and Q have much in common, and I know that Sean will keep Q's pioneering racial justice action research agenda alive and growing. Moreover, I am proud that Sean and I have been able to secure the resources that will enable Q's professional staff to stay intact. Debbie Hansen, Esmeralda Hernandez Hamed, Megan Chase, Jordan Greer, and Maricico Wheaton will continue to lead the implementation of Q's tools and methods, staying true to the path that we have traveled over our 20 years of normalizing racial equity. Q's work, including all its existing contracts, will continue uninterrupted. In fact, it will be strengthened by the knowledge and resources of the Race and Equity Center. I am so grateful to you, my dear friend Sean, for your commitment to continue and sustain Q's legacy. So there you have it. 2 announcements, the merger of Q with REC and my retirement on December 31st, my retirement from USC. But that is not all. As for my own future, while I have often fantasized about leisurely mornings in Los Angeles or Mexico City, reading newspapers or the New Yorker or the Atlantic or the New York Book of Review, I know that this fantasy would not survive much more than a week. I am not a relaxing type of person. And unfortunately, other than restaurants, wine, and movies, I have no hobbies. I do not garden. I do not yearn to learn photography. I don't play bridge, although I must confess that at one time I was a very good player of pinochle. This is all to say that I am only retiring from USC. I am not retiring from work. I plan to continue doing many of the same things I do now, but I will do some of them independently and others in collaboration with Sean and other colleagues. I am excited to announce that I have just created Bensimon and Associates, an independent organization devoted to advancing the racial equity agenda. Oh. So sorry about this. I have lost my, so let me just continue without my text. I am excited to announce that I have organized Bensimon and Associates. And with that, I will have a 15-month project with the post-secondary team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And I will be working with them in the next 15 months to support them in their efforts to focus on socioeconomic and racial equity in their investments. So I said that I have no hobbies. But one regret that I do have is that I have never spent much time volunteering and sharing my knowledge and resources with others. But the pandemic gave me the opportunity to do something about that. And for the last 2 months, I have been volunteer with the union, Unite Here, Local 11. And I work with their Spanish-speaking members completing their unemployment applications online, which I have to tell you is not an easy thing to do. So in doing that work, it has given me insight into how stressful the life of service workers with very, very low incomes is compared to my privileged life and the privileged lives of my colleagues. And so that made me realize that when the pandemic hit, I, like many others, thought, oh, I can't wait till we can return to normal. But you know what? That's not the normal we want, because that's the normal of inequity. What we need to yearn for is a different kind of normal. We need to think of a normal that brings about the redistribution of wealth, that brings about a living minimum wage, that brings about a guaranteed income, that brings about universal health, and that brings about the documentation of today's thousands and thousands of undocumented students who are being denied the benefits of the CARES Act. So with that, let me just say that I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the many supporters in the foundations. Thank you to the Ford Foundation. Thank you to Carnegie. Thank you to Lumina. Thank you to ECMC. Thank you to the College Futures, to the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because you made my work possible. And last, I want to say something about the people. We don't get here alone. There are many people who have helped me. So let me start out with Bob Birnbaum. He was my advisor when I did my doctoral work. He was my mentor, and he was able to see in me something that I could not see in myself. I wouldn't be here without his mentorship. I want to acknowledge my very long friendship with Anna Newman, who is here today, as she has been with me so many other times since 1986. We wrote our first academic book together. I also want to acknowledge my 31-year friendship with Bill Tierney, a friendship that has been probably equal parts joy and equal parts angst. There are many more that I could think. I want to say something, though, about Alicia Dowd, who was the co-director of the Center for Urban Education for about 4 years. Alicia's no longer with us. She's at Penn State University, but she left a very deep intellectual imprint in the work of CUE. So I'm very grateful for that. And last, I want to thank USC for almost 25 years, I think, of joyful work. And for the last 20 years that I have been able to have CUE, which would have not been made possible had I not had a very generous grant from then Provost Lloyd Armstrong and Executive Provost, Deputy Provost Mike Diamond. Thank you all for joining me here for this happy event. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next few months. And what I would like to do now is I would like to ask Michelle Siqueiros, the president of the Campaign for College Opportunity, someone who both Sean and I consider ourselves lucky to have as a friend, and she will share some remarks with you. Michelle.
Thank you, Estela. Thank you, Sean. I have to just start by saying that as we watch our nation attacked by this pandemic, as well as the more insidious virus of racism in America, the one thing today that brings me so much joy is to be in this space with each of you and to hear that the Center for Urban Education is joining the Center for Race and Equity at USC is like hearing that your superheroes are finally together. And so what an honor to be part of your celebration, to congratulate Estela, 20 years of an incredible run as the director for the Center for Urban Education. And I know you said that maybe it was too many decades of work in this space. And I think most of us on this call would argue that it is not enough, that we are grateful for the leadership, the intellectual scholarship that you've contributed, for being active in that scholarship. I first met Estela almost 16 years ago when the Campaign for College Opportunity was just getting started. And it was an interesting visit because I think both of us were maybe in some ways skeptical of each other. You know, Estela not quite convinced that policy change was everything. And maybe I wasn't totally convinced that scholarship alone was everything. And I think the center and Sean's work at the Race and Equity Center have both demonstrated that we are so much better and stronger together. I am grateful for your leadership, Estela, for everything that you have done to better educate me as an activist and leader in California. Sean, having the opportunity to know you and to see you in action has brought me so much joy. The two of you represent intelligence, empathy, class, so much style. If we were here in person, we'd be able to see that more clearly. And more than anything, just love. You love our communities. You care about making this country truly great. And I'm just honored to be in your realm and to continue to advance a more just and racially equitable world, because I do believe, and I will never stop believing, that we can achieve justice and equity in education and in all aspects of our lives. Thank you. I can't wait to join you in the next 20, 30, or 40 years.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm almost in tears, I think. I have to keep it together here. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Max Espinosa. Max is a program officer who works with both me and Sean. He is at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we are both lucky to have him not only as our program officer, but as our friend, particularly when he comes to Los Angeles and we get to spend some good times. Max?
Thank you, Dr. Bensimon, and thank you, Dr. Harper. And ignore the background if you must. I know it's the UCLA background, and we're talking about two scholars and centers at the University of Southern California. So don't let that distract you. Like Michelle, I feel fortunate to be here with you today in the midst of what is happening in our nation, knowing how hard you two as individuals have worked for change. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge on the outset how important the work you have done as a scholar, Dr. Bensimon, and as a scholar activist, and how important that work continues to be today. Your long and distinguished career as a faculty member, your critical action research, and founding and directing of the Center for Urban Education for the past 20 years are extraordinary legacies for the fight for a more just and equitable educational system and world. I know I speak for many of my colleagues in the philanthropic and equity communities in expressing our deepest thanks for all you have contributed and all those that you have trained to carry on this work with you. We are so glad you will continue your work in your well-deserved retirement. I think retirement requires some quotation marks around it. And no, it will not be a typical retirement, given the urgency I know you feel for what still needs to be done. It is hard not to also acknowledge the time we are in today, and how much more we must do to dismantle the long-standing vestiges of racism and the inequities it has perpetuated. The events of the past week and days are but another sad and unfortunate reminder that the roots of racism are deep, very thick, and stubbornly embedded throughout our society. The educational system is not spared and often exacerbates these inequities and injustices through the unequal distribution of resources, the methods, the practices, and the structures that are put into place, and the unconscious biases that go unaddressed, among other things. Founded by Dr. Bensimon in 1991, the Center for Urban Education has worked to bring equity-mindedness to institutions of higher education through socially conscious research, tools, and training. They've empowered practitioners and policymakers to act as agents of change and to actually do the work of equity, not just use the words. They have helped turn good intentions into actual action. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is but one of several philanthropic organizations that have partnered with CUE over the years. I've been fortunate to get to know Dr. Bensimon and the important work of CUE and attend some of the institutes and trainings they have put on. We have also partnered with them most recently with Dr. Bensimon and CUE and Dr. Sean Harper and the Center for Race and Equity to support California's system and college leaders in implementing recently enacted state policy reforms like developmental education and guided pathways, among other reforms with an equity lens. If anyone knows Dr. Bensimon and the work of CUE, you don't just attend one of these trainings. They actually put you to work. I've been fortunate to attend a few of these trainings, including the Equity and Faculty Hiring Institute, designed to increase racial equity in the hiring process. CUE, as Dr. Bensimon mentioned earlier, finds that structural, political, human, and cultural factors must be addressed in things like the job announcements, questions asked of candidates, the assessment criteria. Often foundation representatives like myself attend events and observe, but that was not the case here. I participated just like every other attendee over a 2-day intensive training sessions, and I left the Institute, although I'm not a faculty member, feeling very much energized and empowered with specific tools and strategies. It was tangible, actionable, and all of the institutes have done that. The merging of Dr. Bensimon's legacy and the Center for Urban Education with the USC Center for Race and Equity, led by Dr. Sean Harper, could not be more fitting and appropriate. In Dr. Sean Harper, Dr. Bensimon has found her academic and scholar activist soulmate. Like Dr. Bensimon, Dr. Harper is not just a distinguished scholar, but a fierce, unapologetic scholar activist for equity and the dismantling of structural racism. The symbolism of this new partnership with a new generation of scholar activists at a time when Black and Brown lives continue to be under assault and racism continues to tear us apart cannot be overstated. Dr. Harper's research and scholarship in racial and gender equity and inclusion in the educational, corporate, social, and organizational context, plus his energetic leadership of the USC Center for Race and Equity is and exciting. Dr. Harper and the Center for Race and Equity will undoubtedly carry out the great work and legacy of Dr. Bensimon and CUE and its staff. And it is just as urgent now as it was 20 years ago. I, along with many of my colleagues in the philanthropic and equity community, look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to express my congratulations and excitement about this news that you're sharing today. We look forward to working with you and continuing to urgently eradicate structural inequities in our society. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Tia Mcnair from the Association for American Colleges and Universities. I have known Tia for about 10 years. I'm also, I have the honor of being a fellow at AACU. Thank you, Tia, for joining us, and I really look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Estela, and thank you, Sean, for inviting me to be here at this momentous occasion. Just like my colleagues have said, this is a time where communities are going through so much trauma, and to have the opportunity just to come together in this space with you is renewal, it's refreshing, it's going to give us all energy to move forward. And I just want to say thank you for your work, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this announcement today with your, and I'm with you too, Max. I'm putting it in quotes, retirement, because I don't think she'll ever retire. I don't think so. So I remember the first time I met Estela and Sean, it was when we attended the ASH Critical Action Research, the Equity Institute. And remember, we were in Santa Monica. They're shaking their heads. Do you remember that? We were in Santa Monica. Anna was there as well. And I almost didn't get invited to participate. I had to prove myself to Estela. So Michelle, just like you said, you've had to have that conversation with her about whether or not policy versus the research piece. I had to prove to her, because I was working at a nonprofit in DC, and she didn't know me, didn't have any connections. And so her and Alicia called me up, and I remember being in my office, and it was, this is Estela Bensimon and Alicia Dowd, and we have a conversation. We received your application for the Institute, and we want to have some questions. We have some questions for you. So they asked me questions about why I wanted to attend, to talk a little bit about myself and how it would benefit my work. And needless to say, I am glad that I got the acceptance letter, because going to that institute changed my pathway and my career projection in so many different ways. So Estela has been this amazing mentor and guide for me, and someone who has challenged me in so many different ways. And out of that institute came our very first project. Estela, do you remember? with Boston Public Schools. And Tiffany Jones, who's at Ed Trust, was our graduate research assistant on that project. So Tiffany, if you're out there, I know you remember our many trips to Boston. Since that time, Estela and Sean, you both have been my advocates. Every time that I have needed somebody to lift me up, someone to say, keep going, you're doing great work, you have been there. And it's not just me, you've done that for so many people and so many of us just across the higher education spectrum. I am glad that you're a distinguished fellow at AAC&U, which means, Estela, we'll get the opportunity to continue to work together. But you also were on our board of directors, and you were challenging us to talk about equity and equity mindedness at a time when, as you already mentioned, diversity was at the forefront of the conversations. Since then, Estela and I have worked on several projects, including our recent book, From Equity Talk to Equity Walk, Expanding Practitioner Knowledge for Racial Justice in Higher Education. Your concept of really focusing on practitioner knowledge and our own sense making and how we actually examine critically what that means and how we interpret student success is something that stays with me all the time. It is something that I bring in the conversations that I have when I'm at institutes or I'm working with institutions, letting people know that our mindsets do influence the decisions we make. And it's not the fault of our students, it's us that we need to change. And I just want to say thank you so much for just guiding us through that whole series of conversations about what it means to be equity minded and look at our practices and our policies and our structures and not putting the blame on those students who've been traditionally marginalized in higher education. So I've learned so much from you, and I continue to learn from you every day. You've guided so many of us to ask the difficult questions when others have shied away from that. You're that person that's sitting on my shoulder and tells me all the time, don't be afraid to raise the difficult question. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. You have lifted me up, and this is where I'm going to try not to cry. When having conversations about who I am as a person, with my son, who I worry and pray about every single day, about what it means to raise a Black man in this country. You were speaking about racial equity, and you developed the concept of equity minded as a time when people weren't even having that conversation, and you had that courage. You were fearless so we could be fearless. And I thank you for that. And I will respect you and treasure you forever, Estela. And the work that you've done for all of us is just amazing. And I just want to say thank you for being the person that's always whispering in my ear, saying, speak your truth. And congratulations on your retirement. And congratulations to you and Sean on the merger. I am looking forward to working with the center as it merges these two powerhouses together. And we can do the work to really examine racial equity in higher education and to eliminate structural racism. I'm blessed to call both of you my friends. And thank you for challenging us and for inspiring us. Cheers.
Thank you, Tia. That was wonderful. And thank you so much. I have learned from you, and I have been pushed by you to finish that book. So thank you. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce probably my longest academic friend, Professor Anna Newman at Teachers College. Anna and I met around 1986. We were both working on a leadership project, a leadership research project at Teachers College with Bob Birnbaum, who I mentioned earlier. And we've been friends since then, since 1986. And I cannot even think about the number of conversations she and I have had in coffee shops, on near Teachers College, on the phone now, and in every conference we meet for dinner. So it's amazing that she's here with us today. And I'd like to introduce you, Anna, And thank you for being here and for being such a wonderful, wonderful friend to me.
Thank you, Estela, and thank you, Sean. It is such an honor to join the two of you, Estela and Sean, to mark the joining of your two historic initiatives, the Visionary and Powerhouse Center for Urban Education that Estela, you founded, and Sean's dynamic and inspired Race and Equity Center. How lucky could USC be to attract two such scholars who have produced and will continue to produce tools and ideas for bringing equity to life and for bringing life to dreams of freedom, inclusion, and opportunity for all. But you know, getting there is hard. For one thing, it calls for acts of imaginative building, of new communities, new partnerships and ventures, new ways to enact the business of our lives. This also requires building a fair and just education system from preschool to post-secondary education to get us there. I know that Sean has been working tirelessly and with great energy throughout his career to do so, addressing the problems of racism in K-12 schools and institutions of higher education head on. But it must be recalled, the building of new structures and new ways of life can occur only on grounds that have been rigorously prepared to receive them. A whole lot of baseless beliefs, discriminatory routines, and oppressive structures have to be cleared out in advance. And today, yes, today, as we've mentioned, we are poignantly aware of the structural and interpersonal racism that unfairly stifles opportunity and at its worst leads to the tragic loss of life. My friend Estela has devoted her career and her own life to exactly this kind of hard, ground clearing and path breaking work in institutions of higher education. She has given inequity a name. She's brought those who perpetuate it face to face with its effects. She's created, tested, and refined tools for stemming its devastation. And importantly, she's taught others to do the same. May Sean's future work and impact grow, fueled by the inspiration of Estela's labors. I have a few personal words to add. As you've heard, I met Estela first in the lobby of the Excelsior Hotel on Manhattan's Upper West Side on a very hot morning in July 1986, as I was interviewing for the job she just told you about. We were both young. We were in our early 30s. To me, Estela was the epitome of the sophisticated, worldly wise New York intellectual. And I had grown up in Brownsville, Texas. Estela kindly explained the New York subway system to me, including how to get on a train. And she offered sound advice on how to navigate the big city. All these years later, I'm still remembering and following her advice closely. And I follow her advice on just about everything else too. But there's very much more that I've gained from our enduring friendship. Estela has shown me how to blend a deep and abiding love of social justice with an unwavering dedication to excellence in scholarship and practice, all mixed in with extraordinary personal generosity. Estela, you've been great. You've been a wonderful, wonderful friend. You are great. And I can't wait to see what you do next. Congratulations.
Thank you, Anna. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And, I have to say that when Sean and I were talking about who we would invite, Sean said we have to invite Anna Newman because she will give us poetry, and you did. I now want to ask Sean to join us. I don't think I need to give him a big introduction, but what I can say is that Sean has been a great friend for me. And as I said, Lena Aston wrote a book many years ago, and it was about feminists. And she said there are the instigators and inheritors. So when I was thinking about today, I thought, oh, well, I'm kind of the instigator, and here is my inheritor. So Sean, with that, please join us.
Thank you so much, Estela. I want to thank you for your generosity in this moment and really over many, many, many years. Estela, you have given me so many gifts. Chief among them is 17 years of superb friendship. I will be forever indebted to you for always standing by my side and for being such an amazing friend. There have been few colleagues who have been nearly as supportive. Honestly, I can only think of another, Lori Patton Davis, my very best friend, but really the two of you have supported me in just some really unimaginable ways that have made me a better person and a better scholar. Estela, thank you for the gift of your friendship. The second gift that you have generously given me and so many others is the gift of your brilliance, the gift of your scholarship. I first met you on paper 21 years ago when I was a graduate student at Indiana University, and Guadalupe Anaya, my Latina professor, assigned me and my classmates a piece that was written by you and Anna Newman. I immediately fell in love with your brilliance, and I wanted to read so much more of your work and Anna's work. And I just went out and I read as much of it as I could, and I became. This is before we had language of fangirling and fanboying. I was fanboying from afar, as I read, your deep thinking, your clear thinking, your rigorous methodologies, and so on. So Estela, I thank you for, really preparing the grounds to receive my good ideas. Anna, I thank you for that poetic framing. It is exactly right. Estela Bensimon prepared the grounds for the work that I and my doctoral advisees and my colleagues at the USC Race and Equity Center do every day. I know that there are thousands, perhaps at this point, even millions of other scholars, not only here in the US, but really all around the world, who can say, Estela, that you have given them a gift that they've been able to build upon in their own scholarship. Thank you. The third gift is 17 years of superb role modeling. Estela, it wasn't just your ideas that inspired me. It was also your approach. You're so bold, so courageous, so unapologetic, and always just so honest, so willing to tell the truth about racism, about structural inequities, about sexism and misogyny, and just so many other things that so few people are willing to tell the truth about. You were the president of the Association for the Study of Higher Education. So too was Anna Newman. I looked to the two of you for an inspiring example of how to be an unapologetic ASH president. You were my blueprint, Estela. You gave me a gift that I, in turn, was then able to turn around and re-gift to others during my ASH presidency. I don't know that I would have been as bold and as courageous during that presidential year had you not been so bold and courageous during your ASH presidency. I wanted to be so much like you, and you gave me not only license to follow in your example, but also just, again, really good friendship and mentoring and guidance along the way. That was such an amazing gift that not only I, but really so many other colleagues in our field have benefited from. Thank you. A fourth gift is so many great collaborations. You know, some of those collaborations fall in the category of, you know, co-conspiring. You and I like co-conspired in ways that have truly made a difference here at the USC Mercier School of Education and elsewhere. I'm so grateful for our collaborations on scholarship and ideas. You know, thank you to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for enabling and supporting, you know, two really great collaborations that we have right now. You know, although our approaches are so different, I just appreciate that you have such a willingness to share your brilliance with me, and that you push me to be modest and thoughtful and humble. And you model that for me, right? When we come together with our ideas, it's such a gift to have a person who is so famous like you be so receptive to a colleague's ideas and a colleague's collaboration. It's such a gift every time I get a chance to sit with you to co-conspire about ways to dismantle structural racism and, you know, a range of isms and inequities. One fifth gift that I want to acknowledge at this time is that you've given me the gift of your trust. You are trusting me with the center that you built 20 years ago here at the University of Southern California. You are trusting me with your staff, with your legacy, with the tools and resources that CUE has created that so many institutions, 678 of them, have benefited from over 2 decades. What an incredible gift you are giving me. It is not lost on me. I've founded a center. I know what it means to build a center from nothing, from the ground up. You know, frankly, I can't imagine what it will take for me at my time of retirement. I will not be 70, but I can't imagine what it will take for me to gift to someone the USC Race and Equity Center when that time comes. I thank you, Estela, for the gift of your trust. You know, really, it's the most generous thing that you've ever done for me. And I know that you're not just doing this for me and for the wonderful staff at CUE, but you're also doing it for higher education. You're doing it for the nation and for the world, because you trust that we are going to continue to do that work in such rigorous, honest, truth-telling, and actionable and practical ways that will benefit our nation and our world. Thank you, Estela, for that gift. I want to make perhaps but one assurance to you right now. I can assure you, Estela, you said in your opening remarks that you have been engaged really over the entirety of your career, but most certainly during the 20 years of CUE, in a fight for racial equity. I can assure you that that fight will continue. Your fight will continue through the work that you do with Bensimon and Associates, and certainly in the work that we do at the center. I promise you that we will honor your legacy by continuing that fight. I appreciate it. I think it was Max who said that you and I are like academic soulmates. That's exactly right. Our souls are forever tethered one to another. I will carry your soul within my soul as I continue to do the work that honors your legacy and the important work of CUE. Right now, Estela, so at the top of this experience, this virtual experience, there were nearly 500 colleagues who joined to celebrate with us and to hear our big announcement. At this point, 297 of them remain with us here on Zoom, and there are another 57 gathered on Facebook Live. I am going to ask the more than 300 of you, if you are able to stand, wherever you are, will you please stand and give Professor Estela Bensimon a standing ovation for her extraordinary leadership.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me and joining Sean, and for all of the wonderful things that you have said. And it has been truly a memorable event. And with that, Sean, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Estela, for your grace. The last thing that I'll say here, hundreds of people just gave you a thunderous, well-deserved standing ovation. But I know that really the best way that we all can truly honor you is to unite together in opposition of white supremacy, in opposition of racism in all of its forms, in opposition of sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, and all of the other things to which you have committed your life and your work. I know that that standing ovation meant a lot to you, but I know that the thing that means more to you is what we do from this moment onward to continue to engage in the fight that you have been fighting. Estela, I love you. I thank you. I salute you. And I congratulate you on your upcoming retirement from the University of Southern California in December 2020. Thank you all for joining us. Take really good care of yourselves. And
thank you, Anna, Michelle, Max, and Tia. Thank you so much.
Okay. Congratulations.